And good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you on our Leadership Development webinar with myself and Arif.
That's right. Welcome back. Hello. Nice to be here again, isn't it, TK? It's been
nice to be
a few
here
weeks.
again. It's been 3 weeks, I think, and we've been quite busy, but it's lovely to see you because today we wanted to talk about something interesting, which is we wanted to talk about planning your next leadership retreat. But before we plan our next leadership retreat, we would love to hear from our wonderful viewers. Where are you from? Where are you hailing us? And where are you watching this wonderful video? Leadership retreats.
In the comments.
Put it in the comments. You can also use the mind transmission. So, Arif, why is this an important topic for us?
Well, I mean, we've been working with a couple of clients where this is coming up.
It is.
And and I think as we head towards like the summer, this seems to be like a kind of area that people look into for their leadership teams, their businesses, about how do we regroup, recap what we've been working on, how do we get better, and then also have some fun along the way as well. So there's like it's quite a common need, isn't it?
It is absolutely. And I think the important thing we would like to know is, where are you in this process? Are you
please.
an L&D or HR professional? Put A in the comment. B, if you're a leader. C, if you're an agile practitioner. And if none of these describe you, put a D. Or maybe a combination of the letters, as you want to identify yourself. We always love to get to know our wonderful viewers. Now, going forward, we've talked about this thing called the leadership retreat, but what is it actually, Arif? How would you define one?
I don't know if there's a standard. I think there's lots of organizations have different needs, don't they? I mean, for some it's like, okay, let's get it out of the office and then have a chance to just talk about our plans for the forthcoming year, forthcoming quarter, whatever it might be, and get to know each other better at the same time. Others, it's very much a case of, okay, we've got some challenges in our leadership team. We would like to get out of the office to try and solve them in a more creative environment, perhaps. There's a mixture of reasons for why organizations look for activities like this, isn't it?
It's a good point, and I think, how I define the leadership retreat is, I guess it's in the name. It's for the leaders to be able to retreat a bit. But what's really important, I think, Arif, in this case, is like, okay, why won't you just do it at an office? Leaders have great boardrooms. They have the wonderful meeting rooms they can use. So why do they need to go somewhere?
Well, I think for some of the reasons I mentioned, like as in if this is driven by the fact that, okay, we want to solve some challenges, perhaps, right? I guess you've got the same office space maybe where those challenges are happening. It would be difficult to then like maybe start different conversations, get different perspectives, have an environment where everyone might feel comfortable. So sometimes going somewhere else and then having external people come in, independent facilitators, coaches, whatever you want to call them, who can then create a different atmosphere, ask different questions, perhaps, help you get to the outcomes you're looking for. You want to go somewhere maybe where that's more comfortable for everyone. It might not be that this environment is going to get you the answers you're looking for.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's a quote from Einstein that the same kind of thinking cannot solve the problems that it has caused, right? Or if I'm getting the quote absolutely correct, probably not. But what I want to say is, if you're in the same space that actually the problems are located, it's very hard to have a different kind of thinking that would be able to solve it. So in we've got a nice comment from Richard that it's absolutely important for them to relax and get creative, to go into a new atmosphere, to go to a different place, to be able to think differently. Now, the interesting thing is, as you said, Arif, it's probably a bit easier to do it over the summer. So this is the perfect time to start planning for your leadership retreat. And we would like to share something about how we approach it. So what is our approach? So in a nutshell, Arif, or there you are. So I will call you and ask you how would you, in a couple of sentences, summarize our approach to leadership retreats?
I think they're very interactive, engaging. Those are key things to have in a leadership tree. You've got to have a clear goal, purpose for why you're having it. As I said at the start, what's the reason you want to have one? Make sure that's really well communicated with everyone attending, so that then everyone turning up understands what they're there for and what commitments need to be made of them, expectations, etc. I think what doesn't help is if you have got teams turning up and they don't really know why they're there, right? And then it feels like they may be ambushed, or there's a problem for that. They are a problem and they need to be, fixed or something. That's the worst thing that can happen. So the comms has got to be really important early on. And their engagement, and then getting their support in terms of why this needs to happen. So that all needs to happen before. But in terms of, that's part of the approach, but then in terms of running it, facilitating it, it's got to be engaging, it's got to be interactive, it's got to be hands-on. They've got to feel part of the solution making. They've got to be part of the problem solving. So you've got to find activities and techniques that leverage all of those behaviors.
And we'll talk about it definitely. But as you said, Arif, right, we're quite well known for using a lot of post-it notes, using all the walls, and using some interesting tools. You can see Arif on the screen, utilizing. Yeah. It is, right?
That was a very interactive retreat when we had a lot of people for that one.
Oh, yes. That's the story, right? So what did we do for that retreat, Arif?
For that one, the one in that photo, that was a full-on
let's tell a story,
game.
Right?
Yeah. The client asked us to create a immersive gamified experience to not only, it wasn't more about teaching, but it was more about showcasing what alternative ways of working may look like for that organization, for the leaders in that organization. There was a huge number there, and we did some Lego based activities.
And we'll talk about them later on. But the interesting thing, Arif, is we really adapted to the industry of our wonderful clients. So they're from an aerospace industry, and they were building airports, simulating what is it to build a green airport. But we'll tell the story later on when we get to our tools. But the interesting thing is here, it's, as you said, Arif, build psychological safety. That's one of the first activities we do. Because, Arif, but first of all, what is psychological safety and why is this important before we get there?
We've dealt with this in a previous webinar, so please go and look for it. But, okay, in a nutshell, it's making sure or creating an environment where everyone feels safe enough to raise challenges, raise discomforting or uncomfortable truths or uncomfortable opinions without fear of blame or fear of being ostracized by the group or the team they're in. That's the core thing here. So if we are talking about, as we said, having an environment where we've got a leadership team that needs to openly talk about challenges they're facing in order to get to some new position, new state, a better state, more actionable items that they can then do to resolve some of that. There has to be safety, because people need to be openly talking about, hey, this is a problem, this is why it's a problem, this is why it's affecting us, we need to deal with it without any fear.
Absolutely right. And I think what's really important and why you focus on that is we don't want to we're not known for stepping away from difficult conversations. For us, it's important to air everything that needs to be aired, because if you actually stepped out of the office for this retreat, this is the moment to talk about problems. So quite often what happens for us is we surface problems. We believe that in a leadership retreat, quite often it's a team building exercise, but it's also a problem solving space. So it's just important for us to be able to get it all out and put it out there. So Arif, what techniques have we used? What have you seen that really works with the clients when it comes to getting them to openly speak about what the problems are?
That's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we've got we use a lot of coaching based techniques, don't we? Talk typically in our work. But I wanted to talk about some of the metaphor-based stuff. So I know we're going to come to it a bit later, but disassociating from what is actually happening directly, and using metaphors is a great tool. We've
It
done
is
that a lot
brilliant, yeah.
with whether it's Lego or other ways of communicating. We've done things like that. We've used coaching based tools where we ask people to simulate what is happening, embodying it physically, using the room space to do that. There's lots of we've done things where we ask people to talk about what's not being said within the challenges of the room, within the challenges of the team, using group-based activities for that. So yeah, a couple of those taken. I know you've probably got more that you can add to that.
I do,
well,
and I
TJ.
think, but what's important here, and we'll talk later about the suites of these techniques, is that after we create a safe space, our leadership retreats are actually moments when we're not afraid to talk about difficult stuff. So it's just important that what we do differently is we don't focus on boring slides, although there's a bit of that, the leaders who usually want to share some important information, but also so people know that it's all about solving problems. But there's more. Even if you get the problems, surfaced, how do we achieve the common understanding on the challenges? So what can happen if we don't understand our challenges in a similar way? Have you seen that?
Pretty obvious. I mean, we're going to have misunderstandings. You're going to have, mistrust. You're going to have, we've talked about the 5 dysfunction stuff in the past, and a lot of that you see in this, where if there's no clear understanding of what the problems are, you're going to have trust issues. You're going to have misdirected efforts, people not aligned to the goal of the team. So there's all these very common hurtful. I say hurtful as in they can hurt not just the team but the organization as well if they're
unproductive
not
helpful, right?
Not helpful, yeah.
But I think what's also really important here is to consider the fact that even if you raise a particular problem, right, that for instance our onboarding process doesn't work correctly, do we actually understand it in the same way? And I don't mean pointing blame, right? But where is this problem located? What does it mean? And by no means I mean who's responsible. But what does it look from all points of view? Because just because you say something is a problem doesn't mean that all parties present understand that in a similar way. And without being able to do that, a solution might be impossible. But when it comes to a solution, the next thing we do after and this is the bulk of the work that we do in our leadership retreats, which is making sure that everyone aligns on what the problem is. And the next thing is understanding how you can solve it. So brainstorming an action plan. We have some cool brainstorming techniques, don't we, Arif?
Yeah, I mean, there's one simple things like dot voting can really help, 1, 2, for all type activities, etc., which I'm sure we'll talk about more in the techniques that we will cover. But I think the key thing here is equal voice. That's what I would say. From a facilitation point of view, it's about making sure everyone has the ability to share not just what we talked about earlier in terms of the problems, why they are problems, but also in this case, when it comes to the actions, what actions they want to take forward, and then being heard and being considered in terms of, excuse me, how they think that the problem needs to be solved. So equal voice is critical, and I think there are. Let's talk about some of those in a moment. But ensuring that the voices are heard, and then getting peers to then talk about them in a safe environment so that they can then either transform them into something better or turn them into something that completely different, right? So
give me some examples, Arif.
Yeah, so I think pair-based work, so individuals being able to brainstorm what they think the problems are, then getting people in small groups to work on them, means that at least in some way, shape, or form there is some equal voice, right? So every individual has contributed to something, and then that way that contributes to a greater idea that as an end result. And then how do we then collaboratively make a decision on what should we take forward. And then you need some constraints around that in terms of what capacity, what's the most important thing, what's the first thing, what's the least complex thing, whatever constraint you want to apply. There's the responsibility aspect as well. Who's going to take that on, and what are you going to do to make that a reality? So the individual responsibility, collective responsibility, all that needs to be discussed before then deciding on what we take forward.
Absolutely. And the question is, this seems obvious, but the toolbox is actually quite complex. So when we look at the way we do things, we use a bunch of frameworks. As we said at the beginning, what's important about how we do things is we keep it engaging by using a variety of tools. Arif talked a lot about metaphor, and we've talked about building an airport, for instance, as a simulation that's destined to be green and sustainable. So that's one of the things we use, but there is much more. Our toolbox is quite wide, and we're going to share some of the techniques and some of the frameworks we use. And I think, Arif, you've mentioned the first one, which is Lego Serious Play. So what is that?
Yeah, so the Lego. We all know Lego. I'm sure those of us with children and when we were children can remember
all
playing
of us were, right?
with Lego at some point in our lives, right? And immediate thing that we all recognize about it is tactile. It's very easy to manipulate. Sorry, in your hands, and it's an immensely creative tool because it's very broad in how in how you can express yourself using it, right? Lots of different ways, easy ways to do that. Serious play is a technique that came out of Lego. It has some official backing. They do produce special kits for work like this in terms of how you create shared understanding. How do you understand each other's realities in a very non-threatening, non-confrontational manner? How do you create shared understanding between people in the room who may have different perspectives on the problem? So they produce very special kits that you can use as a facilitator to then answer some of those questions. So these kits are very much abstract because the pieces aren't what you might get in a typical set that your child might play with. You'll get very obscure and random, you might think, pieces, but they're designed deliberately to help open up the brain so that you can think creatively about how you want to express your problem. So it's all about using the metaphor of Lego to express what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And then it's a skill in the facilitation of what questions you're asking. So it's okay. Can you, and you might give these sets out. So one approach is you give the sets out to everyone in the room, and you might ask questions around, okay, can you use the set to build how you feel about your current team? And everyone will do that differently. And then it's a case of sharing and showcasing how that appears for different people. And then you might want to do some collaborative work, and there are different sets for that. So, okay, how would you collaboratively design your new team dynamics or your new team communication structure? And now that we've talked about what the challenges are, and then you get everyone to use the metaphor of Lego to showcase and design that. So it's very powerful. Very powerful.
It is incredibly powerful, and as you say, Arif, but it's also being able to understand each person's metaphor. So sometimes some things are difficult to talk about directly, but the power of metaphor, like this physical Lego metaphor, can really help to crack some problems out, right? When we've talked about the common understanding of the problems, it is one of the techniques we use to facilitate and build that. Because people from different positions in the organization, people different levels of seniority, even in terms of leadership, can describe and see things differently. And this richness of the tactile way of describing it really makes a difference. And we've seen people able to explain their perspective through that more effectively than they would do with any set of PowerPoint slides. But that's not all. We have more techniques, and we are actually using a suite called organizational relationship systems coaching. So, Arif, you talked a bit about coaching. So, how do we use team coaching for leaders? What are the base tools we do?
This is a very deep work, I think. And really, when you have systemic issues between teams where, especially leadership teams, where communication isn't quite right, where things are not quite defined very well, misunderstandings are quite rife. There's almost verging on toxicity in terms of relationships. ORSC-based tools like this allow you to break all that down and try and get to the root cause of why that's happening. So, and you know this much more than I do, TK. I'm a mere, apprentice when it comes to this model. But I think from how I've used it and what I've seen with it is you're really challenging individuals to go into, okay, what is it that you really don't like about this issue? And you need to surface that dislike. We need to talk about that dislike in a structured manner. And then you need to be involved in creating what the new vision looks like.
That's one of the ways we do that. But essentially the way that systemic coaching works in this case is, you might have heard a name, leadership team. And quite often people would reflect on, they're leaders, but they're not necessarily a team in whatever understanding, right? And what ORSC, so Organizational Relationship Systems Coaching, does is it doesn't coach the individual, but coaches the team. So the team itself, if you know anything about coaching, we have a coaching client. So for ORSC, it's actually the team, the entity of the team, and also it works on relationships. Now, we all probably can tell stories upon stories, but it's probably not something to share in a webinar in terms of boardroom relationships or relationships between leaders and how difficult they can be, how much is at stake, and how much politics and how nasty the relationships can be. And it's counterproductive, obviously, in many cases, but yet not easy to fix. So what we do is we use this suite of tools, and look it up, Organizational Relationship Systems Coaching. We do a lot of this work with leaders to actually go and talk about and work with the issues they're raising, especially the steps that we talked about, which is surfacing the issues, aligning on them, and having a common action plan. This is where this set of tools is quite brilliant to be used. But that's not all the tools we use. Another one, and I think, Arif, this is one of your favorite ones, are deliberating structures. So what's that about?
These are great because they are designed for complex challenges. They are very much like uncoordinated, but they're also very structured in terms of they're a suite, and it's like any box of tools. You've got to design pick the right knife for the job, essentially. So if you've got challenges around, as you mentioned earlier, brainstorming ideas, there are specific tools for that. If you've got challenges around aligning on a problem, there are facilitation tools for that. If you've got challenges around, how do we decide on an idea, or how do we come up with an idea and then decide on it, there are facilitation. So it's there's a diverse set of tools, and they're publicly available. You can go and look for them. Anyone can access them. They're open source, essentially. But the beauty is in the simplicity, and that simplicity allows for a lot of creativity. I mean, one example I like using is that they have this particular tool called a conversation cafe. And when you've got a situation where, let's take what we've just talked about there, where you've got leadership team or group who maybe aren't very aligned, might not be performing as well. There's a problem that maybe they're not talking about or not surfacing and willing to have the conversation about. A cafe-based tool is great because it forces every person to speak. And by forcing everyone to speak, everyone has a voice. And by sharing their voices, then everyone listens, and there is deliberate time given for forced listening of everyone's opinion. That's the only way then you can get to something better, by giving everyone a voice, but making sure everyone listens and pays attention, and then
making sure
acting
they do,
on it.
Yeah, good point.
So
but
that's
also,
just one. Yeah.
that's one of the tools, right? But as you said, Arif, what's great about them is the fact that you are able to string something together, and they maybe constrain you, as Arif used the word forced a bit too many times, but they heavily encourage you to follow the structure, and amazing things can happen. So going back a bit, Arif, why do you think people should consider us, the Humble Associates, for the leadership retreats? We've talked a lot about stuff. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, I'm sure if you're looking for someone who can, creatively, interactively, and professionally, of course, but help your leadership team solve some of their challenges, arrive at a better tomorrow, hopefully, and remove some of the alignment issues, communications problems, or whatever it might be. Then of course we're here to help and support your organization. We would love to do that. We'd love to have that opportunity. So
and if you want to learn more about us, we've got something interesting. So we're publishing a weekly podcast.
That's
so
right.
why should people listen to our podcast? What's interesting there, Arif, as a creative director of the podcast?
Well, it's all about leadership. We're all about that, but specifically, we believe in agile leadership, and more on that on our website if you're interested. This is an opportunity for us to talk about why we are so passionate about agile leadership, but we, more importantly, explore the world around us and find inspirational stories that tell us more why agile leadership is ever more important in organizations today. So if you're interested in what's going on around the world and how that can influence some of these ideas, download our podcast from your favorite podcast player, scan the QR code if you want. TK is hiding.
I'm hiding the code. I'll hide the code.
You're hiding. So we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google, all other platforms as well. You'll find us there. But scan the QR code and get downloading. Thank you.
And and it's every Friday morning. Make sure to do it through that. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you are a regular listener, please do rate the podcast and give us a review. It really helps us with the algorithms. Thank you.
Obviously, if you like it, which we're sure that you do if you're a regular listener. So finally, thank you so much for being here with us. Hopefully you've enjoyed the journey. And again, if you're planning the next leadership retreat over the summer, we're taking on bookings. Some have already booked us, but we do have a couple of weeks still available. And get in touch. We're easy to find here on LinkedIn, our website, other socials, and we'd love to hear from you.
See you around.
See you around. See you soon for the next webinar.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.